Think back, you get out of school for spring break, you are excited, you get home, and begin to think of what your plans are for the break. The break is seemingly coming to an end, but then you get word that there's a global pandemic, and you are to remain inside. You instantly think you are going to get a longer spring break only to realize that things will never be the same. Over the next few minutes, I will be talking about the impact coronavirus has had on the world. This virus has very negatively impacted our nation as our as it consists of major downturns and tragedies. I will introduce some of the major hardships created because of this virus that would consist of an economic downturn, impact of culture, and finally the major impact on society. I plan on providing information on how these hardships have tremendously impacted our very way of life. Let us start with one of the major impacts coronavirus has had on us, which would be our current economy. What are the economic impacts of COVID-19? As fears about the pandemic grow, global markets are seeing trillions of dollars disappear as the economic impact of the coronavirus wreaks havoc on economies across the world. COVID-19 has affected the global economy in three main ways: by directly affecting production, by creating supply chain and market disruption, and by its financial impact on firms and financial markets. How are they affected? COVID-19 has affected the global economy through three channels. Direct impact on production. Chinese production has already been substantially affected by the shutdown in the Hubei province and other areas. Some other countries have already felt a significant impact as their authorities put similar measures in place. The supply chain and market disruption. Many manufacturing firms rely on imported intermediate inputs from China and other countries affected by the disease. Many companies also rely on sales in China to meet financial goals. The slowdown in economic activity and transportation restrictions in affected countries will likely have an impact on the production and profitability of specific global companies, particularly in manufacturing and in raw materials used in manufacturing. The financial impact on firms and financial markets. Temporary disruptions of inputs and or production might stress some firms, particularly those with inadequate liquidity. Traders in financial markets may or may not correctly anticipate or understand which firms might be vulnerable. The resulting rise in risk might reveal that one or more key financial market players have taken investment positions that are unprofitable under current conditions, further weakening trust in financial instruments and markets. So this is the economic impact COVID-19 has had on our nation. Now let us look at the impact on society COVID-19 has had. We are facing a global health crisis unlike any in the 75-year history of the United Nations. One that is killing people, spreading human suffering, and upending people's lives. But this is much more than the health crisis. It is a human, economic, and social crisis. How is society affected? The COVID-19 outbreak affects all segments of the population and is particularly detrimental to members of those social groups in the most vulnerable situations. It continues to affect populations including people living in poverty situations, older persons, persons with disabilities, youth, and indigenous people. Early evidence indicates that the health and economic impacts of the virus are being borne disproportionately by poor people. Older persons are particularly susceptible to the risk of the infection from COVID-19, especially with those with chronic health conditions such as hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. Persons with disabilities, even at the best of times, persons with disabilities face challenges in accessing health care services due to the lack of availability from accessible affordability as well as stigma discrimination. As for the youth, many governments have called on the youth to embrace the effort to protect themselves and the overall population. Youth are also able to help those who are the most vulnerable and to aid in increasing public health, social awareness campaigns among their communities. Thus, youth are critical to limiting the virus's spread and its impact on public health, society, and the economy at large. Indigenous people are particularly vulnerable at this time due to due to significantly higher rates of communicable and non-communicable disease, the lack of access to essential services, absence of culturally appropriate health care, and, if any, under-equipped and understaffed local medical facilities. And that is how the virus affects our society. And now let's look how it affects our culture and entertainment. Okay, and how is our culture affected? Personal values reflect what matters most to us as an individual, thus shape the way we behave. When personal values are in alignment with those of the organization, employees feel a sense of connection and can bring their full selves to work in commitment to its purpose. And this is how the virus has impacted our nation in a short matter of time. This has negatively impacted our nation as a whole, and it will continue to go downhill unless we practice social distancing and manners of staying clean as much as possible. As of now, this has impacted our economy, our culture, and our very way of life as we know it. I hope this has brought attention to what this virus has truly done to our nation and that there is a reason for all the safety precautions.